Welcome back to the gripping saga of Pastor Zion, a man whose rise to power was built on faith, ambition, and dark secrets. In part 1, we explore the beginning of Zion's journey, his humble roots, his rapid ascent in the church, and the fateful decisions that led him into an alliance with a sinister brotherhood. Now, in part 2, we uncover the chilling consequences of those choices. Zion's life, once a beacon of hope and inspiration, is now teetering on the brink of destruction. A scandal involving a teenage girl has sent shockwaves through his church, unraveling the trust of his congregation and shattering his family. As whispers of betrayal grow louder, Zion struggles to maintain his fragile empire, even as the brotherhood's demands push him further into moral darkness. This continuation delves deeper into Zion's descent, a journey marked by betrayal, loss, and the haunting question, how much is a soul worth? Prepare for a story of heartbreak, redemption, and the ultimate price of ambition as we witness the unraveling of a man who once seemed untouchable. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, be sure to check it out to understand the foundation of this tragic tale. Now, let's dive into part 2 of this unforgettable story. The sun was setting behind the golden clouds when Zion, a respected pastor, whose life spirals out of control due to secrets, greed, and a dark association with a cult. His descent from grace highlights his inner turmoil, guilt, and desperation to protect his reputation and family. Zion's tragic decisions ultimately lead to the destruction of everything he holds dear. He sat nervously in his office. He stared at the phone in his hand, hoping for a miracle. The church, his family, and his reputation were all on the brink of collapse. Just weeks ago, his life was perfect, but now it was tangled in a web of secrets, lies, and fear. Zion's troubles began when a teenage girl, Amara, was found unconscious in his church office. No one really knew what had happened, not even Amara herself, but rumors quickly spread. The once loyal congregation now whispered behind his back, questioning his integrity. Zion tried to explain, but the silence of the girl and the disbelief of the church left him feeling helpless. 2 days later, Zion stood at the pulpit, addressing a congregation that had dwindled significantly. The once packed church was now half empty, the air thick with unease. Whispers of his misconduct had spread, though no one dared confront him directly. He delivered a fiery sermon, his voice rising with passion, but his words felt hollow even to him. He could see the skepticism in the faces before him, the doubt that mirrored his own inner turmoil. Back at home, Deborah's demeanor was colder than ever. Deborah is Zion's wife, a devout and principled woman who becomes increasingly mistrustful of her husband. Her unwavering faith and moral compass contrast sharply with Zion's descent into corruption. Despite her love for her family, she becomes a victim of Zion's actions, serving as the ultimate sacrifice for his mistakes. She barely spoke to Zion, and when she did, it was laced with mistrust. She had moved into the guest room, a silent but clear declaration that their relationship was crumbling. One night, as Zion lay awake, staring at the ceiling, he heard soft footsteps. He got up, following the sound to the living room, where Deborah was on her knees, praying fervently. "Lord, reveal the truth," she whispered through her tears. "Protect my children. Save my husband from whatever darkness has consumed him." Zion's chest tightened. He had never felt so far from God, so utterly lost. For the first time in years, he dropped to his knees beside her. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice trembling. Deborah froze, her tear-streaked face turning toward him. "Sorry for what, Zion?" "For betraying me. For betraying God. For everything," Zion said, his voice breaking. "I've made mistakes, Deborah. Terrible mistakes. But I don't know how to fix them." Deborah's expression softened, though her eyes remained wary. "You start by confessing. By turning back to God. Whatever you've done, Zion, He can forgive you, but you have to let go of this life." Zion wanted to believe her, but he couldn't imagine walking away from everything he had built. The cult wouldn't let him leave. And even if they did, the shame of his actions would destroy him. One evening, Zion called his closest confidant and a manipulative figure who represents the darker side of ambition and power. He constantly advises Zion to make morally questionable decisions, ultimately leading Zion deeper into the cult's grasp. Remy was the kind of friend who always had an answer, even if it wasn't the right one. Zion poured out his confusion, asking, "What do I do, Remy? The church doesn't believe me, and Amora won't speak up." Remy thought for a moment before replying, "You need to visit the girl's family and apologize. Take your wife, Deborah, with you, it'll help convince them. Bring gifts and some financial compensation. Explain everything to them, and they'll believe you." Zion nodded but hesitated. "How can I convince Deborah to go along with this? She already doubts me." "Then make her understand what's at stake," Remy said firmly. "If you don't fix this, you'll lose everything, your church, your family, your name." That evening, Zion sat down with Deborah. She was skeptical and refused to lie for him, calling it selfish and dishonest. But Zion pleaded with her, reminding her of the life they had built together. "If you don't do this, we lose everything," he said, his voice trembling. After a long silence, Deborah reluctantly agreed. "I'm only doing this for the sake of our children and the church," she said. The next day, Zion and Deborah visited Amora's family, carrying expensive gifts and a story they had rehearsed. Deborah, though reluctant, spoke convincingly, supporting Zion's claim that nothing inappropriate had happened. Amora's parents accepted their explanation, and the tension in the church began to ease. For a time, it seemed like life was returning to normal. The church grew stronger, and Zion's reputation started to recover. But Deborah's trust in Zion was shattered. She withdrew from him, her heart weighed down by guilt and suspicion. 4 months later, Remy visited Zion with a chilling message. It was time to pay homage to the brotherhood that had helped Zion rise to power. Remy explained that Zion needed to make a sacrifice, a loved one, as a symbol of loyalty. Zion was horrified. "What do you mean, a loved one?" he asked, his voice shaking. Remy's eyes were cold. "Your wife, Deborah, is the chosen sacrifice." Zion clenched his fist. "I can't. She's my wife, Remy." Remy sighed, his tone patronizing. "Zion, you're at a crossroads. Your wife suspects you, the church is crumbling, and the life you've built is slipping away. This sacrifice isn't about loss, it's about transformation. If you don't act now, you'll lose everything anyway." Zion felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath him. "No. I can't do that. I love my wife, I won't sacrifice her." "She's also your undoing," Remy snapped. "Do you think the court will tolerate this? Do you think I will tolerate this?" Zion's voice dropped to a whisper. "What if I just leave? Disappear?" Remy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think they won't find you? You think I won't find you? There's no escape, Zion. You made your choice the day you stepped into this life." Zion's heart sank. He felt trapped, a prisoner of his own ambition and greed. "You have 7 days," Remy said. "If you don't do this, everything you've built will crumble, and the brotherhood will come for her anyway." Zion was trapped in a nightmare. He couldn't bear the thought of harming Deborah, but the consequences of defiance loomed over him like a dark cloud. In the dead of night, Zion made a terrible decision. He stole one of Deborah's personal items and presented it to the brotherhood, hoping it would satisfy their demands. Days turned into weeks, and when Deborah remained alive, Zion felt both relieved and confused. But peace was short-lived. 6 months later, the church began to decline again. The congregation dwindled, and finances dried up. Desperate, Zion sought answers from the brotherhood. Their leader revealed that Zion had failed to fulfill another requirement, sleeping with virgins to maintain his power. "You must sleep with 70 virgins within 10 days, the leader commanded. Zion was horrified. "That's impossible. I can't do this." The leader's gaze was cold. "If you don't, everything you have will be destroyed." Zion's protest fell on deaf ears. Left with no choice, he attempted to comply, but guilt and fear consumed him. As the deadline approached, the court leader suggested an even darker solution. Zion would have to use his own daughter Emanuela to complete the ritual. Emanuela is Zion and Deborah's 13-year-old daughter, a symbol of innocence and hope. What do you mean? Zion asked hesitantly, though part of him already feared the answer. Reby leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Your daughter. Zion recoiled, his breath catching. No, that's out of the question. I've done everything you've asked, but not this. Never this. Zion stormed out, his mind a chaotic whirlwind of fear, guilt, and anger. He couldn't fathom hurting his daughter, but Ryby's words haunted him. As the days passed, Zion became more paranoid. He felt the walls closing in, the weight of his choices suffocating him. Deborah continued to pray, but she also started asking pointed questions about his activities. Zion deflected as best he could, but he knew she was getting closer to the truth. One evening, as he prepared for another ritual, he heard Deborah's voice behind him. Where are you going, Zion? He turned slowly, seeing her standing in the doorway with arms crossed, her face a mask of determination. To pray, he lied. Deborah's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me. I've seen the changes, Zion. The secrecy, the late nights, the strange people coming and going. What are you involved in? Zion felt his temper flare. You don't understand, he snapped. I'm doing this for us, for our family. Deborah stepped closer, her voice rising. What family, Zion? The one you're destroying? You think money and power can replace your soul? You've turned into a man I don't recognize, and I won't let you drag me or our children down with you. Her words hit him like a slap, but instead of breaking down, Zion doubled down. You don't know what it's like, Deborah. You don't know the sacrifices I've made to keep this family afloat. Don't stand there and judge me when you've benefited from everything I've done. Deborah's expression turned to one of heartbreak. I never asked for this, Zion. I wanted a husband, a father for my children, a man of God. Not whatever you've become. She walked away, leaving Zion alone with his rage and despair. The mere thought made Zion sick. His daughter, Emanuela, was only 13, how could he betray her innocence? But as the 10th day approached, Zion's desperation outweighed his morality. The fateful day arrived. Zion gave Emanuela a drink laced with a sleeping potion, but before he could carry out the unspeakable act, there was a loud knock at the door. Zion froze, his heart pounding as the knocking grew louder and more urgent. He glanced at Emanuela, who lay unconscious on the bed, then back at the door. He hesitated, unsure whether to proceed or answer. Finally, the knocking became so persistent that Zion had no choice but to open the door. Standing there were several church staff and members, their faces somber. Some were in tears, while others looked as if they had just received devastating news. Zion's stomach churned. What's going on? Why are you all here? He asked, his voice trembling. One of the staff members stepped forward, struggling to meet his gaze. Pastor, it's Deborah. She's been in an accident. She didn't make it. The car crashed on the highway, and she died on the spot. The words hit Zion like a thunderbolt. His legs buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, his hands clutching his head. No. This can't be true, he cried out. They tried to console him, but Zion was inconsolable. His thoughts raced wildly, and then it dawned on him, the brotherhood. This was their doing. Deborah was the sacrifice all along, and they had taken her without his consent. Meanwhile, Emanuela began to stir in the bedroom, waking up confused and unaware of what had transpired. The house quickly filled with church members, family, and friends as the news spread. Zion sat in the corner of the room, a hollow shell of a man. For the next 3 days, Zion couldn't sleep. His dreams were haunted by visions of Deborah, her voice echoing in his ears, accusing him of betrayal. He saw the faces of the young girls he had wronged, their eyes filled with sorrow and anger. Each time he woke up screaming, his staff dismissed it as the shock of his wife's death. But Zion knew better. Desperate for answers, Zion called Reby repeatedly, but there was no response. Then, one evening, news reached him that Reby had been murdered. The shocking details followed swiftly. Rumor had been having an affair with a church member's wife, and the enraged husband had taken his revenge. Zion's world was crumbling. Left with no one else to turn to, he contacted the leader of the brotherhood. The leader's voice was cold and mocking. "You disobeyed us, Zion. You were supposed to fulfill your duty with your daughter, but you hesitated. Now, you will suffer the consequences." "No, please," Zion begged. "I didn't know. I couldn't do it. She's my child." The leader laughed cruelly. "There is no forgiveness here. Your torment is only beginning." The line went dead. Zion let out a blood-curdling scream, tearing at his hair as he ran through the house like a man possessed. His behavior alarmed those around him, who assumed he was still grieving Deborah's death. But Zion began confessing his sins loudly, exposing every dark secret he had hidden. "I lied to you all. I betrayed my wife. I made deals with darkness," he shouted, his voice echoing through the halls. The shocked church members tried to calm him, but Zion was beyond reason. One fateful evening, Zion's mind finally broke. He ran into the streets barefoot, screaming incoherently about demons and curses. His congregation, once loyal and adoring, now watched him with a mixture of pity and disgust. Days later, Deborah's parents arrived to take Emanuela and her younger brother, Joshua, into their care. They wanted nothing to do with the disgrace Zion had brought upon their family. As for Zion, no one knew where he had gone. Some claimed to see him wandering the streets, muttering to himself. Others believed he had died in the wilderness. But his name became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how greed and betrayal could destroy even the most seemingly righteous lives. In the end, Zion's descent into madness became the ultimate price for his choices. His once thriving church crumbled, his congregation scattered, and his family left to pick up the pieces of a life shattered by greed and betrayal. Deborah's death, though tragic, became a turning point for her children, Emanuela and Joshua. Under the care of their grandparents, they were shielded from the dark legacy of their father and taught the values of truth, humility, and faith. As for Zion, he became a ghostly figure in the city's memory, a cautionary tale whispered among the faithful. His story served as a grim reminder of how ambition without integrity can destroy not just a man, but everyone around him. And so, the legacy of Pastor Zion faded into obscurity, leaving behind only the lessons of his tragic fall from grace. Hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please share your thoughts in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on more amazing content. See you in the next video.